What do the most profitable and successful consulting firms have in common? They productize. We've generated over $10 million in productized offerings, and I share that not to boast, but simply because we know a thing or two about this. So let's get into it. Productizing used to be thought of as, creating an online course or having some kind of training. But successful consulting business owners are actually using productization to grow their consulting businesses. So first, let's break down and actually look at what is productization. Productizing consulting services is the process of transforming your expertise into standardized offerings that can then be sold repeatedly with less customization. What's the benefit of that? The first is profit margins. Companies and consultancies that use productization tend to have higher profit margins compared to those that don't. Another benefit is that because your offer is standardized, because it is a process, it's repeatable, you can hire junior level or mid-level people in terms of their experience, as opposed to if your consulting business is customized, where you're always doing new things. Then you need people who have more senior level experience because they're going to need to have that deeper expertise and experience to know how to adjust and change things on the fly and handle all the different situations. But when it's productized, you get to document, the objections, the challenges, generally where things are going to work and not work. Now, to talk about productization just for a moment before I go over some of the other benefits, the way to think about productization in comparison to more customized consulting approach and kind of business model is that in custom, you might think of it that 80% of what you do is going to be customized for that individual project, client, situation. 20%, give or take, let's say, is going to be standardized and repeatable. Productization is the opposite. Let's say 70 or 80% of what you do is the same for every single client, but you still customize 20 or 30% of it to match their specific situation. So there's, even in the most kind of successful productized offers, they generally still have a level of customization. If you're having, offering an online course or some kind of training or a workshop, you might have 100% productized. It's the same for everyone. You don't change anything. But as you move up in terms of the dollar value of your offering, and I'll talk about some ranges here in a moment of what people, actually charge for productized offers, you'll find that there still is an element of customization. You change the slides, you bring in new examples, you talk to the client and adjust things and change the order of what you might take them through a little bit to create the outcome that they want and based on where they are. But even with that being said, the majority of the work is standardized, and that's why you can bring in more junior level people. Now, the other benefit is you'll have more case studies and results that are targeted. If you imagine a competitor that does custom work and they have a bunch of testimonials or case studies on their website, but they're for all different things, all different services, all different types of companies and clients, and it's just kind of a mishmash, but you focus on working with one type of organization or one type of client or one type of industry, and you're really solving one main problem, well, you can have a lot of case studies and a lot of testimonials that demonstrate that you've done this over and over and over again. So if somebody else has that problem and they want that outcome that you can create through your productized offering, do you think they're going to be more impressed with a company that has multiple examples of creating success and solving that specific problem, or another company that maybe has one or two and then a whole bunch of other things that they don't really care about right now, right? Of course, it's going to be the former over the latter. The other is that you build up expertise. You and your team are doing the same thing over and over and over again, which means you get better at it. I often kind of refer to the Japanese swordsmith who creates the samurai sword known as the katana. They're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, which allows them to create these swords that can cut through anything. That is what history has told us. Then the next is that it's easier to scale, right? When you know the process, when you're targeting one type of client, when your messaging doesn't need to change depending on who you're talking to, when your pricing is also typically more set, when you or your team are doing the same things over and over, right? When your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, your processes, any technology that you're using, when all of it is standardized, when it's repeatable as opposed to things always changing, it's easier to scale that because you can eliminate waste and inefficiency because you see things happening over and over again and you can strengthen things. So it's easier to scale, it's easier to improve. The other benefit is it creates a lot more value in the business. If you look at consulting firms that are offering a lot of different services to a lot of different people, because there's a lot more moving parts and there's less consistency, they tend to be worth a lot less. What you'll find also in most most of the solo to, smaller boutique, so let's call it under, 20, 15 people consulting firms, is that when there's a lot of customization in those business models, the founder is generally still very involved in those businesses. But when you have productized offers, because it's easier to hire, because it's easier to scale, right? And because you have a more defined process, you're able to extract yourself as the owner or founder from that business and build a team and build the systems, build the technology or whatever it is that can run that. Therefore, less reliance on you means that the value of the business increases. It also increases because of the standardization, because of the greater depth and detailed documentation that you have. And because it's also more valuable, it also means that it's easier to sell. Now, I'm not saying that you want to necessarily, you're thinking to sell your business anytime soon, and maybe you never will. But if you want to build a business that you can sell, then productizing is a real benefit because it's much easier for an acquiring company to take over, and you have all this documentation. You have a lot fewer moving parts. You have a team or systems or processes or tools that they can just kind of plug into what they're doing, or they can grab it and use it much more efficiently, effectively, quickly, compared to trying to manage the complexity, right? Kind of these octopus arms of moving around with all these different customization. And I'll add to this that it's also easier to market. If you offer 4 different services to 3 or 4 different, client segments, and you're a small boutique consulting firm or even solo consultant, it's really hard to market that. You have to talk to a lot of different people to, speaking about different things, different processes, different price points, different use cases. There's just a lot to process there, a lot to manage, which also makes it harder then to market, because if you're talking about a lot of different things, you're not really sure what to say and how to introduce yourself. And there's just all these variables, that's harder to market. In addition to that, as a buyer, if a buyer hears that you do all these different things, it's kind of hard for them to grasp onto what are you really great at? And, when they leave that conversation, they're wondering, and it's hard for them to remember, what are you actually, an expert in? And what does that person really do? It's hard for them to associate and to remember you because you've talked about a lot of different things. Whereas if you come off and say, we solve this one problem, we work with this type of client, we create these kind of outcomes and results, if that's what they need, it's going to speak to them right away. It's also a lot easier for them to remember. And the other part is it's easier for them to decide. This is why it's easier to market and to sell, right? So I mentioned selling the business, it's easier to sell if you have productized elements in it, which I truly believe because I've seen it. But it's also easier to sell your services because when you talk to a buyer about a lot of different things, or you have a proposal that has tons of different options and variables and all this kind of stuff, and if you can go in and say, hey, we solve this problem, we have a whole process for it, here's the results that we create from it, would this be the right thing for you? It's kind of like yes or no. Doesn't mean that in a productized offer you may not have different levels or options in your proposal. You certainly might, depending on the factors of size of business, number of people you're working with, but there's a lot of variables there. If you're thinking, hey, I want to productize, or I want to make sure I'm not leaving a lot of money on the table as I roll this out, or maybe you have some elements of productization, but you're wondering, how can I scale it better? How do I take things to that next level? Then click on the link below this video or go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching, because this is what we do with our clients every single day. Not only have we generated well over $10 million from productized offerings ourselves, we've helped clients to do the same. So get in touch today. Go on and click that button right now, or click on that link or whatever it is and get in touch. We'd love to have a conversation with you, and we'll let you know whether we can help you or we can't. But let's come back to it. So it's easier to sell because people can make a decision. Whereas if you say you have all these things that you can do, you have 4 different service offerings, they, as the buyer, now need more time to think through and try and decide which of these things do we need? What do we not need? But if you have one clear offering, it's much easier for them to make that decision. Next, you get to develop your IP, right? As you're building out your productized offer, there's going to be IP, intellectual property inside of that. That doesn't mean to say that when you have a customized model that you do not have IP or that you don't develop IP. You certainly do. But with a productized offer, you're really making it known, and it's very focused and concentrated. Next is consistent quality. You can imagine that if you're doing something over and over and over again, you're going to get better at it. If you're doing 5 different things and then you do another 5 different things, it probably means that you're not going to be exceptional at any one of those. You'll probably be good, but compared to somebody who's doing the same thing over and over, or something very similar over and over and over again, they're going to get better at that one thing. Just they have more reps, right? They have more practice. Now, all this said, to productize, it's really hard to do it if you're brand new to consulting. And the reason is that you need to have some data and experience already, right? You want to already know what works and what doesn't. Who do you want to work with? What problem do they have? What do they they value? If you're not sure, if you don't have clear answers to those types of questions, it's probably too early for you to productize. So if you're brand new and you're thinking, hey, this is great, I'm not saying you can't productize, but it's gonna be harder for you to productize effectively because the most effective and successful productized offers are based on the consultant or the firm already having some data to make decisions, right? To understand, what are you really good at? Where can you create the most value? Where's there the most demand? What do people really want? How long does something take? What is the right process to solve that problem? When you understand that, now you can make the decisions that are going to be helpful for you to create a really compelling and effective productized offer. Next thing is you want to audit and think about, what problem are you world-class at solving? To really develop a productized offer that will be successful, and sustainable for you and for your business long-term, you want to aim for that you not only enjoy doing in terms of the work, but something that you can become exceptional at. And maybe you're already exceptional at it, or maybe you're just really good at it right now, but you believe that by doing it more, you can become world-class. That's what you want, right? You truly want, and this is why for us at Consulting Success, we work with consultants over many, we've been doing this for 2 decades, or Consulting Success for about 17 years now at the time of recording this. We've been building consulting businesses for over 20 years. And the number of times that other entrepreneurs and business owners have said to me, Michael, what you're doing could apply to different types of entrepreneurs and business owners. Why don't you expand? You'd reach a much bigger market. And I've always said, you're right, that we could, but we want to be world-class. We want to focus on working with consultants because that's the market that we know. That's what we're doing day in, day out. That's the area where we have insights and experience from the trenches, actually doing the work. And so this is why we've been able to be so successful, and why we've been able to create so many case studies and results with our clients, because of that focus. That's what productization is all about. Next step is you want to document your process to solve that problem. So first you think about auditing, what can I be best at? What can I become world-class at solving, right? That's the problem that you want to solve. That's what your productized offer will solve. Then you want to figure out, what is the process, the steps I need to take to solve that problem. You write all that out. Then you optimize that process to focus on results. Maybe there's something inside that process you should remove. Maybe there's something you need to add. What will create the best result for your client? Now, I know that many of you might be wondering, well, how much can I charge for productized offers? Because as I mentioned back in the day, right, many years ago, people thought of productized offers only as an online course, passive income, make money in your pajamas while you sleep, all that kind of stuff. And there's some element of truth to that, but it's certainly not like that anymore. Productized offers should be based on ROI, meaning that your pricing should reflect a very positive, great return on investment for your client. And these can be offers anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 or more, right? I've interviewed consulting business owners that their minimum, their starting point for a productized offer is $50,000. And then they move into other next level engagements that are $150,000, $250,000, $500,000 or beyond. But $5,000 to $50,000 is a really good sweet spot for a productized offer, and especially a productized consulting, service. So think about that. Then what you want to do is document what the outcome and value is. So if a buyer says yes to this, right, what is going to be, and even before they say yes, but you want to think through, right, what is the outcome going to be for them? What is the value for them? How will this impact them? And then build a business case around that. If you're a consultant and you want to grow your consulting business, our Clarity Coaching program, we have a whole business case to show you why it might be right for you. And if you match certain criteria, and if you're at a certain stage where you're serious and committed to growing your consulting business, again, go to consultingsuccess.com, click on coaching, read that page, watch the video, and you'll understand what the business case is for you. And if it makes sense for you, get in touch. And if it doesn't, all good, right? But you want to make sure that you create a very compelling business case that you can walk your ideal client through so that they can clearly see the value and the reason for doing this. And they get to then make that decision. Now, once you've done that, the next thing that you want to do is you want to start using this in all of your content, right? You want to start talking about and giving examples and, kind of framing and seeding the idea of what your offer is and who you help and how you help them, what your program looks like. And then you begin reaching out to people. You let them know what you're doing. You have conversations. A great approach is to talk about the problem that people are having, right? What's the problem that your ideal clients are having right now? Explain the benefits of solving that. Mention that you are planning to do, to take a few people through this. And so let me back up for a moment. I'll give you a real life example. Many years ago, when we first started the Clarity Coaching program, and it actually wasn't called Clarity Coaching when we first launched it, but when we decided to launch the Clarity Coaching program, we had a bit of an email list because we'd been already publishing many articles on consultingsuccess.com. And so we had people that were on our email list. And what we did is we sent an email and we said, hey, if you're dealing dealing with these issues and you want help to solve them so that you can have these kind of results, here's what we're thinking about doing. We had not built anything. Like the coaching program didn't exist, but we wanted to get in, we wanted to see, is there an appetite? Is there interest in what we are planning to develop? And from that, we generated a whole bunch of calls. People replied, or they booked a call. Can't remember exactly if they just hit and replied back in that time, or if they booked on a calendar. I don't remember, but they did one of those two things. And then we had a bunch of phone calls with people, and a bunch of people became clients. And I remember, I think it was like $40,000 that we generated from that first email that went out. And we were like, wow, this is powerful. And that's a high level of an approach that you could use. Obviously, there's a lot more details of how to frame that and structure it. And we've refined that process with clients over the years. But my suggestion to you, again, this is not financial legal advice, but think about how you can do something similar, whether it's an email, whether it's LinkedIn, some other social channel that you're on, wherever your ideal clients are, right? Put that out there. Let them know what you're thinking about doing and see if they're interested, okay? Because if you have a focused offer, it's gonna be much easier to sell people. It will either resonate with people or it won't, but that's the idea. Your marketing should give people a very clear kind of yes or no. Am I with this person or am I not? Does it resonate or does it not? Will this solve a problem I have or not? Your goal should not be to try and attract everyone that you possibly can into your world. You should try and actually push away, right? Repel the people that are not going to be a good fit. But by doing that and speaking, very precisely, you'll end up attracting people who are a great fit. And based on the conversations and based on that feedback, you'll be able to adjust your messaging and your process to see better and better results. But as I said, don't build. Don't spend time building out your whole productized offer and doing all that. Simply start with an outline. Create a simple outline of the benefits, what's the problem you're going to solve? What are the benefits that people will receive? What's the process you're going to take them through? Any other kind of details that will help somebody to get enough information so they can just decide, hey, am I interested in learning more about this? Then go and sell it, right? Validate. Once you have people that have paid for it, then go out and build it. And over time, you're going to find that a good portion of your market wants what you're offering. Now, as I mentioned, we've helped hundreds of consultants to develop productized consulting services. And we've done this in our own business, generating well over $10 million specifically with productized offers. So if you'd like help, if you'd like to dive into your specific situation and how you can do the same, then just head over to consultingsuccess.com, click on coaching, or below this video or somewhere on this page where you're listening, you can click on a link that will take you directly there, and then put in a bit of information about yourself, and we'll hop on a call and we'll talk about how you can do something similar.